James Carter had seen a lot in his life, thieves, liars, and people who thought rules didn't apply to them. But nothing could have prepared him for the sheer audacity of his next-door neighbour, Karen Mitchell. The first time he saw her lounging by his pool, he thought he was imagining things. It was early evening, the sun dipping low, casting a golden hue over the water. James had just stepped out onto his back porch with a cold beer in hand when he spotted her. Stretched out on one of his lounge chairs, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, and a drink in her hand like she owned the place. For a moment, he simply watched, trying to process the sheer boldness of it. This wasn't some teenager sneaking into a hotel pool for a quick dip. This was a fully grown woman, comfortably making herself at home in his backyard. He cleared his throat, waiting for her to acknowledge him, but Karen didn't even flinch. "You lost?" he finally asked. Karen lazily turned her head, lifting her sunglasses just enough to glance at him. "Oh, hey, James, didn't see you there," he frowned. "Didn't see me, in my own yard? Well, I figured you weren't using the pool, so I thought, why let it go to waste?" She waved a hand dismissively before taking another sip of her drink. James exhaled sharply through his nose. "Karen, this is my property. You can't just come over here whenever you feel like it," she scoffed. "Oh, come on. We're neighbours. What's a little pool sharing between friends?" James narrowed his eyes. "We're not friends. And I've already asked you before. Stay out of my yard." She laughed as if he had just told a joke. "You're so uptight. You were a cop, right?" No wonder. His jaw clenched. He had dealt with criminals, con artists, and rule breakers for years, but Karen was something different. She wasn't dangerous, just entitled, which somehow made her even more infuriating. People like her believed they could do whatever they wanted without consequences, and the worst part, she actually thought he'd just let it slide. He took a slow step forward. "Karen, I'm not going to ask again. Get out of my pool." She rolled her eyes dramatically before standing up, grabbing her towel as if she were the one being inconvenienced. Fine. No need to be so serious, officer." She slung the towel over her shoulder, walking past him toward the gate. "Honestly, you need to relax. You should try using the pool yourself sometime." James watched her go, his fists clenching at his sides. He had spent years enforcing the law, dealing with situations far more dangerous than an annoying neighbour, but something about Karen got under his skin in a way that criminals never did. Maybe it was her complete lack of respect, or maybe it was the way she acted like she was doing him a favour by trespassing. He locked the gate behind her and sighed. He knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer, and that was fine, because if she wanted to keep testing him, she was in for a very rude awakening. James knew Karen wouldn't stop unless he made sure she learned her lesson the hard way. Talking to her had been pointless. She either laughed off his warnings or acted like he was overreacting. He had spent years dealing with people like her, the ones who thought rules were just suggestions meant for other people. If she wanted to keep treating his pool like her personal resort, then she was about to get a reality check. He started with security. He installed a set of motion-activated cameras around his backyard, ensuring he had every angle covered. If Karen so much as stepped foot onto his property again, he would have undeniable proof. But that was just the first step. He wanted something more immediate, something that would make her regret ever thinking she could trespass without consequences. That's when he remembered an old trick from his police days. A special dye that reacted to body oils and sweat, designed to catch people sneaking into private pools. It was invisible in water, but the moment someone got in, the chemical would turn their skin a bright, unmistakable green that would take days to wash off. Perfect. He ordered the dye online, and when it arrived, he carefully mixed it into his pool under the cover of darkness. By morning, the water looked completely normal, no hint of what was waiting beneath the surface. Now, all he had to do was wait. And Karen didn't disappoint. That afternoon, James watched from his living room as she strolled right into his yard, completely ignoring the private property sign he had recently put up. She was wearing a bright pink bikini, her hair tied up in a messy bun, completely at ease as she set down her towel and slipped into his pool like she belonged there. James didn't say a word. He just leaned against the doorway and waited. It took less than 5 minutes before it happened. Karen let out a blood-curdling scream, scrambling out of the water so fast she nearly slipped. She looked down at her arms, her chest, her legs, bright green. Her entire body had been stained as if she had just rolled in a field of neon grass. "What the hell?" she shrieked, staring at her hands in horror. She rubbed at her skin, but the colour didn't budge. If anything, it seemed to spread, getting darker with every frantic motion. James finally stepped outside, crossing his arms as he watched her panic. "Something wrong, Karen?" She whirled around, eyes wide with fury. "What did you do to your pool?" He shrugged. "Oh, that? Just a little something to keep unwanted guests out." "You dyed me?" she screeched, still scrubbing her arms uselessly. "I didn't dye you," James corrected, smirking. "The water did. It's a security measure. Turns out it works really well." Karen let out a frustrated scream, snatching up her towel and wrapping it around herself. "You're going to pay for this, James." He raised an eyebrow. "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one trespassing on my property. I've got the whole thing on camera." Her mouth snapped shut. He could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she realized just how deep she had screwed herself. If she caused a scene, he could take the footage straight to the authorities. And Karen hated consequences. She huffed, flipping her now green hair over her shoulder. "This isn't over." James just smiled, watching as she stormed out of his yard, leaving wet green footprints behind. Oh, he hoped it wasn't over, because he was just getting started. The dye didn't just stain Karen's skin, it stained her ego. James knew someone like her wouldn't take this humiliation lightly, but that was precisely the point. People like Karen only learned through consequences, and now she had to walk around town looking like the Grinch's long-lost cousin. By the time the sun set that evening, James was already receiving messages from the neighborhood watch group. A few of his neighbors had spotted Karen rushing home from his yard, dripping wet and bright green. Someone even posted a blurry picture of her running down the sidewalk, wrapped in a towel, her legs and arms glowing like a radioactive experiment gone wrong. James couldn't help but chuckle as he scrolled through the comments. Did Karen finally fall into a vat of karma? Looks like she got caught in the Hulk's embrace. Wait, did she sneak into your yard again, James? Instead of replying, he uploaded the security footage from earlier that day, the crystal-clear video of Karen hopping his fence, slipping into his pool, and then shrieking in horror as she realized her skin had turned green. The group exploded with laughter. Serves her right. Maybe now she'll learn to stay in her own damn yard. James, you should press charges. This isn't the first time she's pulled something like this. The idea was tempting. Karen had been nothing but a nuisance since she moved in, always acting like she was above the rules. But James wasn't interested in dragging things into legal territory. Not yet, at least. If she tried anything else, he'd have no problem taking this to the authorities. For now, public humiliation was punishment enough. And it was humiliating. The next morning, James made a quick run to the grocery store. He hadn't planned on running into Karen, but fate had other ideas. As he strolled through the aisles, he spotted her near the produce section, frantically rubbing at her arms with baby wipes. It wasn't working. The green had faded slightly, but was still very visible, especially around her neck and hands. A woman standing beside her, a concerned-looking mother, hesitated before asking, "Are you feeling okay?" Karen's face twitched. "I'm fine." The mother took a step back, ushering her child away as if Karen had contracted some contagious disease. James couldn't resist. "Morning, Karen." Her head snapped up, eyes burning with pure hatred as she realized who was speaking. "You." "Me," James agreed, tossing a bag of oranges into his cart. "You're looking a little green today. Not feeling under the weather, are you?" Her nostrils flared. "This is your fault," she hissed under her breath, stepping closer. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me?" "I'd say about as much trouble as you caused yourself by trespassing," James said casually. "Again." Karen's jaw tightened. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's justice," James corrected. "You've ignored every warning. You thought you could keep walking into my yard like it was your own. Now everyone knows what happens when you don't respect people's property." Karen's hands clenched into fists, but she didn't dare make a scene. Not here, Not when half the town had already seen her humiliation online. "Enjoy your shopping," James said with a smirk before walking away, leaving her fuming in the middle of the store. As he headed for the checkout, he couldn't help but think, maybe now, finally, Karen had learned her lesson. But then again, he had a feeling she wasn't done yet. James knew Karen wouldn't stop unless she learned her lesson in a way she couldn't ignore. She was the type who thought rules didn't apply to her, that her entitlement was a free pass to do whatever she pleased. He had warned her. He had asked nicely. Now it was time for her to face the consequences. He started with security. He installed motion-activated cameras around his backyard, making sure every inch of the pool area was covered. If Karen trespassed again, there would be no denying it. But surveillance alone wasn't enough. James wanted something more immediate, something that would make her regret ever stepping foot on his property again. That's when he remembered an old trick from his police days, a special dye designed to catch trespassers sneaking into private pools. It was invisible in water but reacted with body oils, turning a person's skin a deep, unmistakable green. The best part? It wouldn't wash off easily. The stain would linger for at least a few days, ensuring that everyone would know what she had done. It was perfect. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, James poured the dye into the pool and gave it a quick stir. By morning, the water looked exactly the same, calm, crystal clear, and completely unassuming. Now, all he had to do was wait, and sure enough, Karen took the bait. That afternoon, James was sipping his coffee inside when he noticed movement on the security feed. Karen had let herself in again, completely unfazed by the fact that she had been warned. Repeatedly. She wore an expensive-looking pink bikini, her hair pulled up in a loose bun, and a smug little smile on her face, as if she had won somehow. James didn't say a word. He just watched. She set her towel down on the lounge chair, stretched her arms above her head, and dipped her toes into the water. When nothing seemed amiss, she slid in completely, sighing in satisfaction as she floated on her back. It took about 3 minutes before she noticed. At first she frowned, running her hands over her arms as if something felt off. Then she looked down, and then came the scream. A high-pitched, panicked shriek tore through the yard as she scrambled out of the pool like it was full of acid. She tripped over her own feet, landing hard on the patio, before stumbling upright and staring at her skin in horror. Her entire body was green. Not just a little green, bright green, like a cartoon villain. Her legs, her arms, even her face had been stained, the colour clinging stubbornly to her skin no matter how much she scrubbed. "What the hell? What did you do?" she screamed, turning wildly as if looking for an explanation. James stepped out onto the porch, casually leaning against the railing. "Something wrong, Karen?" She spun toward him, eyes wide with fury. "What is this? What the hell did you put in your pool?" James sipped his coffee. "Oh, just a little something to keep trespassers out." Karen's breathing was ragged, her chest rising and falling as she stared at him, realization dawning on her face. "You did this on purpose?" He smirked. "Sure did." She let out a strangled noise, her hands clawing at her green-stained arms. "You ruined me! I have plans tonight." "I have a date," James chuckled. "Guess you'll have to reschedule." Karen let out a furious shriek, grabbing her towel and wrapping it around herself as if that would somehow fix the problem. "You are insane! You are so going to regret this!" "Am I?" James raised an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the one covered in evidence of your own bad decisions." He pointed toward one of the cameras mounted on the house. "I've got the whole thing on video. You trespassed. Again. And this time, the entire neighborhood's going to know about it." Karen's face paled beneath the green dye. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She knew James had her trapped. With one final glare, she stormed out of his yard, leaving wet, green footprints behind her. James sighed, shaking his head as he watched her go. He had a feeling this wasn't the last time Karen would try something stupid, but next time, he'd be ready.